Matt Bueller, and you're watching Shotgun Wrestling Radio.
This is the mechanic Big Beasley, and you are listening to Shotgun Wrestling Radio.
This is Rory Fox, your Central Empire Wrestling Champion, and you're watching Shotgun Wrestling Radio.
This is Gavin Parker, and you're listening to Shotgun Wrestling Radio.
What's up, everybody? It's Leon King here, of course, the baddest of the baddest, and you are now listening to Shotgun Wrestling Radio.
I am Eric S. Knight.
And I'm Malik Champion.
And we are the chosen Prodigal Sons, and this is the Shotgun Wrestling Radio podcast.
This is your Deathmatch Daddy Bo guy, and you're watching Shotgun Wrestling Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Brock Anderson, and you are watching Shotgun Wrestling Radio.
This is Augustus Draven, and you're watching Shotgun Wrestling Radio.
Welcome everybody to another edition of Shotgun Wrestling Radio. I'm your host Zach Takis, and we at this point are just a little over a week away from all of us being in Waterloo, Iowa at the George Trez Luthagos Hall of Fame weekend. And man, I'm super excited for tonight's guest because as a part of the weekend, we always do the big Impact Pro Wrestling show, and there's a big marquee matchup for the show that's been announced. Talk about two legendary families in the wrestling business. We have Brock Anderson against Wes Brisco. Both their dads are going to be in this corner, and my guest tonight at this time, I'm going to welcome in Mr. Brock Anderson. Brock, it is awesome to have you on the show tonight, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Zach. I appreciate you having me on the program tonight.
Man, it's awesome to get you on here. And again, like I just said, it's going to be a match between you and Wes Brisco that's being advertised right now with both your dads in your corner. You think of the name Anderson, you think of the name Brisco. Talk about just two legendary family names. When you first heard about this opportunity, kind of what went through your head?
Well, I thought, dang, it's on now. I mean, you hear that name Brisco, and you know that I'm sure Jerry and I'm sure Jack, when he was still alive, taught Wes a couple of holds and a couple ways to get you down. Legendary shooting family, legendary, amateur background translated to the pros, which is not always the case, but they had a hell of a career. So, like you said, two legendary families in this business. You think about Jack and Jerry, and I was trying to think. I don't know if they ever had any run-ins with Gene and Ole, but I know that whole situation down in Georgia, just the history with the Briscoes and Ole, it's so we get to write a new chapter on Saturday.
Yeah, and again, this lineup we have coming up here this year, about a week from basically, I think Wednesday is when a lot of people start arriving in the Waterloo area, and again, it starts Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday with the big show. And you got people like Jazz coming, obviously you and your dad coming, Nikita Koloff, Greg Gagne, Dr. Tom Pritchard, Tito Santana, Mark Henry, Thunderbolt Patterson, Les Thatcher, Conrad Thompson, Tony Schiavone, just to name a few. And while we're sitting on here on this podcast specifically, were you as surprised as a lot of people were when your dad said he was going to get into the podcasting game?
Yes, very, because you're talking about a guy who I still to this day have to help him figure out how to Google something. So when he told me he's going to do a podcast, I was like, oh my God, he just went from 0 to 60 just like that. But yeah, I think he's found to enjoy it. It's a great way to connect with the fans that he wasn't able to when he was working as a road agent with WWE. He was on the road so much, he never had time. And it wasn't even a concept yet. So I think he does enjoy doing the podcast. He was a little hesitant at first, I think, because he just didn't know what it was or what it really does. But once he's found out and learned the process, I think he loves it.
Well, and the podcasting game, man, has just changed so much over the last several years. We started doing this show, particular in 2010, and just to see where podcasting in general had gone. Like when we first started it, we had to explain to people what the hell a podcast was. I mean, our name is Shotgun Wrestling Radio because it originally kind of started, we called it a radio show to start. And obviously, as time progressed, it eventually just turned into a podcast. We just kept the radio portion in our name. But yeah, just to see where podcasting in general has become over the last several years is pretty insane.
Oh, God, it dominates all the platforms. I think there's so many podcasts there's so many podcasts for individual niches that It's ridiculous. Everybody can listen to one. It doesn't matter what you're interested in, what your hobbies are. Probably a podcast for it.
Yeah,
Wrestling,
yeah.
there's several.
And the cool thing is too, like when we first started this show, we would focus on the national scene and do a lot of that. And then as time went on, Iowa got blessed with a ton of independent promotions. I think right now we're up to 5 or 6 alone in Iowa. So we kind of shifted our focus to focus more on the local side because we're like, there's already a ton of people that talk about national. We can focus on local and kind of have our own little niche here in the state of Iowa. And for us, it's pretty fortunate because we got some pretty great talent out here, and I think you guys are going to see that come Saturday night. Is this going to be your first time doing an indie show in Iowa?
Never been to the Heartland. I'm excited. I've never been to Iowa. I didn't know. I didn't even know. You just told me there's several well-run promotions out there. I had no idea. Now I know Davenport's out there, and I know that's a mecca. I know Seth Rollins is from there. I know it's a mecca for MMA training. I know there's a big gym out there.
Yep.
So I am excited to get out to Iowa and put my eyes on this Hall of Fame that I've heard nothing but good things about. I've heard it's a really, really well done museum, and it's a very cool. They have cool pieces that people
Yeah.
have donated over the years.
Yeah, the thing I've always loved about the museum, it has something for every type of wrestling fan. If you're an amateur fan, it's got a ton of amateur stuff. The pro wrestling wing, obviously, for us pro fans, is a lot of fun. But like I said, even just from an amateur wrestling standpoint, it's really cool. And kind of to get into your history here a little bit. I'm sure you told the story 100 times. When you kind of decided that you really wanted to get into wrestling, did your dad try to stop you at all, or was he pretty helpful with getting you to the right place to go?
So he never stopped me per se, but he did when I was so I've told this, like you said, I've told this story elsewhere, but I'll tell it for people that haven't heard it. When you grow up and you're, 5, 6, 7 years old, you want to be something different every week. One week you want to be a firefighter, one week you want to be a cop, one week you want to play football, one week you want to play baseball. You don't know. You just go whatever your attention is on at the moment. To me, my dad worked with WWE and I knew what he did, but it was just his job, and I thought it was a very cool job and I got to be around it. But I don't think the moment that I figured out that I really want to do this was till I was about age 12. They would take us out to the WrestleManias. They would allow the employees to bring their families as like as a thank you for the year, and it was almost a vacation. So it was WrestleMania 25, Houston, where the Texans play. I was sitting there and those shows were starting to get really long. They were doing the pre-show, they were starting to do all that's when that was starting. So it was like it turned into a 6, 7 hour show before they split the two nights. And this is probably 3.5 hours in. And all of a sudden you see the video package play and this white smoke starts coming out. And like this very, very heavenly music starts playing. And none other than the Heartbreak Kid himself is coming from the ceiling in that what he's wearing that white long
Yep.
jacket, wearing that white hat coming down. And then it was the heaven and hell match between him and Taker. And the match they had that night, I was glued to my seat, just watching every minute. And they had a hell of a match. It's my favorite match of all time. And just the way that they had those people in the palm of their hands, something in that moment said, all right, this is what I want to do. I've made up my mind. So to get back to your question about did he ever stop me? From that moment on, I knew I wanted to do it. So once I graduated high school, I was like, this is what I want to do. There's no point in going to college. Like, this is what I want to do. Let me go to Japan, whatever. He said, nope. Flat out no. He's like, you're going to get a degree, have a backup plan. The second you get a college degree, I'll train you. So I went to East Carolina University here in North Carolina for 4 years, got my degree. The second I got it, I said, all right, it's time to train. I graduated December 19, and we started training here in Charlotte at the Team Fearless Training Center with Lodi from WCW, member of the flock, in January 2020. So I'm in it. I said, let's get the ball rolling.
Wow, that's again not pretty crazy. And then obviously 2020, you start in January. Did you guys have to shut down starting in March at all when the rest of the world started to shut down, or were you almost done with training?
So no, no. So we started 2 months, and I think I remember the date was March 16th. I remember is like really when the world shut down. I
Yeah.
remember seeing a
Yep.
sign at the gym saying everything's going to be shut down 2 weeks. We didn't
Yep.
know what was going to happen. So initially we had to shut down the class. So I got 2 months in, I was starting to get the hang of everything. And I think we were off, couldn't train for another I want to say 2 or 3 months. And then we kind of, just played it by ear, make sure if you weren't feeling well, don't come in, take tests, the whole 9 yards. And it was pretty good process. We didn't have any major faux pas or anything like that. So we got to keep the ball rolling, but we were off for about, I'd say 2 months.
When it finally came time for you to have your first match, what was that feeling like for you? And did you have any type of nerves? 'Cause obviously, doing your first match in front of people as opposed to just your training school is a lot different. What was going through your mind when you finally got time for your first match?
So I never had a match. I started training January 2020. I went, my dad was up there already with Cody, and Cody said, how's the training coming along to my dad? He's like, he's doing good. He's like, well, how about, have him come down with you. Let's see what he's got. Had a little training match with John Schuyler, who's a local guy here in the Carolinas, a great wrestler. He's with Impact Wrestling as well, one half of the Good Hands. He was down there at the time, and we had like a little 10-minute match, and I think it was unanimous that, I think he's ready. He's ready to at least take that next step. So that was February, and I think they spent 5 or 6 months trying to figure out what to do with me. So this was COVID era. So if you remember, to get noise, they would have all the extras that weren't working
Yep.
would be out
And
in the crowd.
I actually enjoyed that a lot more than like virtual screens. I thought that
Yeah,
was something that was it gave it that more of a live feel to it, even just having the wrestlers around screaming.
it was a genius idea. It definitely made even 100 people out there made a difference. Just giving noise, something to react to, something to feed off of. So I never had a match until that first match with me and Cody tagging together against QT and Aaron Solo. That was my first match, period. I mean, I'd had,
Wow.
you roll around in at practice and everything, but in front of any other people, that was the very first match I had.
Wow, that's one way to have a first type of matchup, especially on national television like that. Now, I do got a couple questions from one of our fellow listeners, Bryant here. He wanted me to ask
Oh,
you
okay.
these two as I pass it along. One of the questions was, did you appreciate the pressure that came from having the Anderson name, or do you wish you would have gone by another name?
No, I don't think about it at all. It's always something somebody else has to remind me. Like I'm not walking around 24/7 thinking about, the shadow that the name casts. It's always somebody asking like, what do you think about that? Or what do you think about that? It's just I'm doing my own thing, but I'm blessed to have that name and have that responsibility to try and carry on the legacy of the Anderson name. But no, I don't feel any pressure. Right now, me and believe it or not, CW Anderson are tagging together here in the Carolinas, and we're starting to get some steam. We're starting to get the ball rolling. We have the AML tag team champions, and I think we're starting to really find our footing. And if people aren't careful, we might be coming for some other belts as well.
A great attitude to have. And the second question that he had here for you was, from the start of your AEW run to the end, what did you feel you had most improved on?
It most improved, I think confidence, just confidence. There was so many guys on that roster that you only had a finite amount of, chances because, guys who I respect would come up and give me pointers and help me out, guys in the back. It wasn't always the policy with everybody, but you had so many guys in the back. You had like my dad, I have him all the time, but you had Jake the Snake, you had Dustin Rhodes, you had Dean Malenko, you have you know, Jerry Lynn, you have Mark Henry back there, you have Big Show, Jericho, all these guys that have done this for so long and made it. I'm sure I'm leaving a couple people out, but I would just pick their brain and say, hey, what do you think there? Or what do you think there? And they'd be like, this was good, but this was terrible. And I would apply it. But yeah, I think just working in front of those, 4,000 people just gave me confidence. It was just, then it made it easier to go work in front of 500 people, in front of 1,000 people, because you'd already been in front of 4 times that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, as you had just mentioned, you mentioned the name Mark Henry. Mark Henry is another name that's going to be joining us here for Hall of Fame weekend next week in Waterloo, Iowa. Again, just the likes of Sergeant Slaughter, Mark Henry, Baron von Raschke, Bill DeMott. I mean, JBL, James Beard. It's Dan Gable. I don't know if you've met Dan Gable before, but you'll get a chance to meet Dan Gable here
Oh, that's
next week. And
awesome.
yeah, so and he's legit, man. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. So if you've ever a Dan Gable fan growing up or just hearing the stories about him, it's pretty fun experience to meet him.
Well, he doesn't have to be mean. Everybody knows that Dan Gable will whoop you. Even at his age, he'll still whoop you. He'll still tie you in a knot. So that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a lot of fun, and a couple questions that I have here for you. One that I ask every single guest we have because the answer is different every time. Who's your Mount Rushmore of professional wrestlers?
Ooh, see, that's always now pro wrestling's interesting because you can have probably 4 or 5 different Mount Rushmores in it. This is just my favorite, basically,
Yeah,
or
yep.
just okay. Um, Shawn Michaels was my hands down my favorite growing up. I always loved Randy Orton. He's got to be on there. And then, you know what? Hard pressed not to do it. I have to put a tag team on there. And I've got to work with these guys 3 times with 3 different partners, and I've learned so much every single time. But FTR, I'll put on there too.
Yep. Yeah, definitely can't go wrong with FTR. I think those dudes are one of the best tag teams. I mean, I'll say it, if there was a Mount Rushmore for tag team wrestling, they would definitely belong in my top. Just no matter what promotion they've been in, they just absolutely dominated everywhere they've gone.
For sure. They're great. Every time I worked with them, I learned something. And they're
So
great guys.
I went to AEW here a few weeks back, and the week before it was Dax, I think, who broke his foot or injured something. And I was like, oh, the week before, I was really hoping to see FTR at least live one more time, but no such luck had it. But the AEW show is still a fun show. I hadn't been to a non-WWE show before in a long time, so that was a lot of fun. Definitely, the pace of it was just really, really fun. So for those of you that are out there that haven't had a chance to see a non-WWE show, definitely go. It's a lot of fun just to experience something different.
Exactly. Very, very well said.
And the other thing that I've really tried to adapt with lately too, I know Jeff Jarrett and Conrad say it a lot, is just creative is subjective. Like, and that's something I've really tried to take to heart here lately. I'm just like, it really works out better because you don't get so worked up over the silly stuff that you might not like anymore.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So as you guys are traveling from time to time, because you spend a lot of time in the cars, what are you guys listening to, or are you guys listening to anything, or are you guys just swapping stories? Like, what's going on in the cars? You guys are traveling all these thousands of miles across the great United States.
A little bit of everything, a little bit of everything you just said. We'll flip it on a wrestling podcast every now to hear the gossip or hear somebody's take on it. We will listen to the old man loves 70s on 7 on Sirius, so he'll have that rocking and rolling, which I can only take so much of that. And then sometimes if we're listening to a podcast and something intrigues me or a story or something that he may have been there in the company, I'll pause it and pick his brain or pick his recollection of it, or just ask him about old stories or how he would travel. Like I know, I don't think I could have done that Mid-South run they had. He was telling me that, when they would have to go from Baton Rouge, was it Baton Rouge? Or I think
Shiverport,
Alexandria.
maybe.
I'm trying to remember the loop. It might have been Little Rock all the way over to Oak City. They would have a double shot. It would be like there to Oak City, work, then go to Tulsa, and then have to drive from Tulsa all the way to, I believe it was Baton Rouge, and be at TV the next day. And they would do that
That's-
every week.
Yeah, those territory eras, man. I love learning about them just because of little things like that. It's super intriguing to me.
Oh, I'm sure that would really weed you out. I'm sure that would prove if you really wanted to do this.
Now, when it comes to wrestling podcasts, who are some of the favorites that you guys like listening to?
All of them. We like to get, I won't pull out any names, but we got a healthy mix, just depending on what we're trying to find out, who would have the best take or have the most knowledge on it, Any anything on basically Conrad's network, or you can't go wrong. But yeah, it just depends on what is happening that we're interested in hearing their take about.
Do you have any type of post-match rituals? Any special food joints you like to hit if it's open up late, or what do you get? What are some of your post-match rituals you guys like to do?
Well, we try to eat healthy. I try to have something ready to roll, but depending on where we're getting out of or where we got to be, sometimes it's hard to eat healthy. Sometimes you got to swing through a fast food joint and get a hamburger and just peel the bread off. But yeah, we don't have any sort of ritual. It's basically work, shower, hop in the car, head back home.
Do you have a favorite story that your dad has told you time and time again over the years that you just always enjoy hearing his perspective on?
Yeah, it's not a wrestling story, but it's pretty damn funny. So I guess I don't remember the interstate. They're heading down, you'll probably know, in Missouri. I think it's that one connects St. Louis to Kansas City. Maybe goes through Columbia. They're heading down that.
Maybe 35.
It might be. It's him, Bobby Eaton in the front, and then Tony Gillum, the old ring announcer from WCW, was in the back. And they would do the game burp and blow, which everybody's done with their buddy. If they're riding down the road and having a couple beers while they're doing it, before it was highly frowned upon. But they would do that, maybe have about 2 or 3. And, when you're drinking beer, you're going to have to burp a little bit. So I think the old man had a little burp coming. He pointed Bobby's way, burped it, blew it on him. And everything I've heard about Bobby Eaton is he had the weakest stomach. He couldn't take anything. So once that funk hit his nose, he started yakking all over the joint, started yakking all over the car. My dad sees this. He starts yakking. They're going down the road. It's raining, going 70 on the interstate, and they're just throwing up all over each other. He had to yank the car over to the side of the road. They're both peeling all their clothes off on the side of the road of a major interstate, throwing up all over each other. Tony Gillum's in the back. He laughed so hard he physically pissed his pants just from the sight of all this going on. So every time I hear that story, that's pretty funny. Just imagining it in your own head.
Do you have a favorite memory of your time that you were in AEW? Because you were there for quite a few years. Do you have a favorite moment from being over there? I mean, obviously working with your dad must have been pretty cool, but what was some of your favorite memories working for AEW?
I have a few. The first match, obviously tagging with Cody, a guy of his stature, and he's even built on it now. He's the guy. But even then, he was the guy there. And for him to say, hey, let me have the kid, I'll tag with him in his first match. It was not lost on me what he did for me that night. That was cool. And to work against QT and Solo, I thought it was a pretty good match, especially for somebody's first match. That was cool. Me and Lee got the tag with against FTR on a Rampage, which was a learning experience. And after that match, believe it or not, CM Punk said, hey, can I talk to you a minute? And what am I supposed to say? I was like, no, I'll see you later. Said, yes. He pulled us in, me and Lee, into his locker room and said, this was good. Take this out. Work on that. Maybe feature this. And it was mind-boggling to me that a guy of his stature would take the time to watch our match and even give us any pointers. He didn't have to do that. I mean, he's made. He doesn't have to do any of that. So I thought that was pretty damn outstanding. And then just for history reasons, we got to work a dark match. Me and Lee Johnson, got to work against QT and Solo in Columbia, South Carolina, and the reaction we got was actually very strong, and they were with it the whole way just because of that history of the old Columbia Township. They were there, I think every Wednesday they might have been there back in the Crockett days, so they just knew about the Anderson lineage, and they were with it, and it was very supportive, and that might have been the best reaction I got while I was with the company. Those are a couple that stand out.
One thing I really loved that they did for your dad while he was there in that like manager role, I love that he had like a play, like I guess it was like a sheet playbook, kind of like you have if you're a coach. I thought that was just something we hadn't. I don't, at least in my time watching, I don't ever recall seeing like a manager with a little like sheet. I just thought that was one of the coolest things. Do you know where they came up with that idea for him?
I think that was Cody's idea. He wanted him to be, I think in his mind, he didn't want like a typical manager like rant and raving and super gimmicked up. And
Right.
he wanted, I think the idea was like a Bobby Knight, like a straight laced coach. And he had that, you talk about that sheet. I can't remember who came up with it, but they called it the Waffle House menu. And that name stuck to it. And there's still a couple around the house here somewhere.
Do
And
you
you would
have
look and you would look at him, and there was legitimately a breakdown of the moves. Like he's going to do, if he does this counter, if he does that counter. There was a lot of work that went into those.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Now, for speaking of your dad, obviously your dad had a lot of years of experience. Do you have a favorite match of his that you love to go back and watch from time to time?
Favorite match of his. We have all the VHS tapes here, and somebody a few years ago was nice enough to switch them over to DVD.
Oh, cool.
But it literally happened the second the network came out. So you could get everything, but then they started taking things off the network that they didn't want up there. So the favorite one I have access to that I've seen, and it's not like the best moves or the biggest like wow, but there was a match with I think my dad and Rick against Hands of Stone Ronnie Garvin and Dusty in the Philadelphia Civic Center. And Dusty and Ronnie were so over, and this was the beginning of the Horseman run. They were so hated that when Dusty and Ronnie came through that tunnel, the place blew. And in wrestling, the acoustics don't always translate to video because you'll see something in person, like that place was deafening, and then you'll go watch it back and be like, no. They captured this audio, and you can just feel the energy in that building. They didn't have to do anything. And that's when you know you got something good, when you don't have to do a whole lot and the people were just raucous. That's a good match to watch. I did now probably the best match that I would say him and Ole against the Rock and Roll Express in the cage. And I think it was at the Bash. It might have been, was it Great American Bash 85? Maybe.
Sounds about right.
I think that one's a very good match. Any match, WWF match, any match they had with the Rockers
Yep.
was good stuff. It's hard to pick. He had so many good tag partners along the way. I think
he did.
I mean, he held his end of the bargain up, but he also had very good partners, even like when he was tagging with Bobby, tagging with Larry Zbyszko, he always found a way to make it work.
Now, I've got a couple more questions here for you before we wrap things up. We got just a few more minutes.
Okay.
What has been the best advice you've received in wrestling so far?
Slow down. When you think you're going too slow, slow down even more.
I feel like that's a really common theme just from a lot of the wrestlers I've talked to. It's just slow, just continue to go slow, and just again, it's we're gonna see a lot of this. That's what I'm most excited for, to see you and Wes lock up, because obviously the history of just the Briscoes and the Andersons. I think Wes is very old school. I don't know if you've seen him a lot of tape on
Yeah.
him, but he's a very old school cat. I'm really excited to see what you two are gonna put together here next week.
Yeah, I remember Wes. I used to watch Wes when he was with the Aces and Eights in
Yep,
TNA.
yep,
I
love that
remember
storyline.
yeah, that was great.
Do you try to keep up with everything that's going on right now? I mean, there's so much wrestling. I used to joke when I was a kid that, hey, someday we're gonna have wrestling on every day of the week, and sure enough, now we literally have wrestling on every day of the week. Do you
Yeah,
try to?
yeah. I try to watch. I do. I really try. But if I don't get to it, I just go to the old Twitter feed and look at
Yeah,
highlights,
yeah,
keep up with it, just bullet points.
yeah.
But I do try. But like you say, it's literally every night.
Yeah, who would have thought when we were coming up as kids that we'd have, but at our fingertips, no less, every single night if we wanted to. And now here we are, just blessed with, and that's the beauty thing is too, is for you guys as workers, you have so many different places to work. There for a while, it was just the one company, but now you see all kinds of guys like you making really good money even on the independent circuit.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a great time to be in pro wrestling. There's so many, like you said, there's NWA, there's MLW, there's Impact, WWE, obviously, AEW, obviously. You can go to Mexico, you can go to AAA or CMLL, or you can go over to Japan. They got 3 companies. So yes, and then all the little independent promotions around the country and Canada for that matter.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely just a great time to be a wrestling fan. And again, it's going to be a great time to be a wrestling fan in Iowa here next week at the Dan Gable, George Tragos Luthez Hall of Fame Wrestling Weekend here next weekend in Waterloo, Iowa. Everything starts Thursday. Kickoff social Thursday night. We have the Hall of Fame ceremony on Friday night, so that's different this year. In the past, it's always been Saturday, and then we have the Impact Pro Wrestling show on Saturday night this year. So it's going to be a lot of fun. You'll be able to check out Brock and his dad Arn at the show as well. And again, Brock versus Wes Brisco. It's going to be a fantastic match. Before I let you go, where can people follow you at on social media to keep up with everything that you're doing right now, man?
So I have to look at the handles. I'm both on Instagram and Twitter. On Instagram, you can follow me at all lowercase Brock Anderson AEW. I have to change that probably. And then on Twitter, you can follow me at, I think, B capital Brock and then capital A Anderson with 3 N's on Twitter.
So there you go, folks. If you aren't following him yet, please go ahead and give the man a follow. And he's got, again, fun matchup coming next week in Waterloo. And that's going to about wrap it up for us here this week on this edition of Shotgun Wrestling Radio. Brock, thank you for joining me here this week, guys. Until next time, we will see you right here on the World Wide Web.